She baked it for you, Tom asked. I nodded. Then why'd she smile like it was a business deal? The frosting was still soft when I shoved the cake into his hands. Doctor's orders, I lied. Truth was, that cake wasn't a gift, it was bait. The next day my father's pocket watch vanished, then my tools. Then she stormed in screaming I'd humiliated her for handing her fake little trap to the wrong man. Now she's telling neighbors I'm senile and filing to take control of everything I've built. But what she doesn't know, I've kept records of everything since 1975. And this time, I'm the one setting the trap. My name is Harold Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning, I follow the same quiet routine in my modest home, brewing percolator coffee while organizing my ledgers at the kitchen table. My late wife Louise's cinnamon-scented pot holders still hang by the stove, untouched since she passed. My neighbor Tom Reynolds, a widowed carpenter 10 years my junior, waves from his workshop as I take my morning walk. My daughter Linda Parker only appears when she needs money, her designer clothes and sharp smile making each visit feel like a sales pitch. What she doesn't know is that I've kept every receipt, every bank statement, and every note from our conversations in chronological order since 1975. The morning light catches my reflection in the kitchen window, and my jaw tightens with resolve. But let me start from the beginning. I spent that afternoon getting ready for my birthday the way I always did, just tidying up a bit and laying out the few things that mattered. Louise's crystal cake stand got its yearly polish, though I knew deep down it would stay empty again. Still, some habits die hard. The soft cloth moved in circles over the glass, and for a moment I caught a whiff of the lemon polish Louise always insisted on using. Keeps the memories clear, she used to say. My father's pocket watch came next, carefully placed on the mantel, where the light caught its worn brass case. I'd wound it that morning, same as I did every birthday since he passed it down. The steady tick-tick-tick filled the quiet house while I straightened the chain just so. You know how sometimes you can feel something coming, like the air gets thick before a storm. That's how it felt when the doorbell chimed at exactly 6:30. Linda stood there with a white bakery box, her smile stretched wide as a circus tent. Before I could even get a word out, she'd swept past me into the living room. "Happy birthday, Daddy." The way she said it reminded me of those TV commercials where everyone's too happy about their laundry detergent. "I brought your favorite." Now, I hadn't told her my favorite anything in years, but I nodded anyway. "That's thoughtful of you, honey." Right then, Tom Reynolds appeared in the open doorway, holding up my mailbox key. "Found this by the fence, Harold. Thought you might be missing it." "Oh, come in, I said, grateful for the buffer. Tom's solid presence always had a way of steadying things. He stepped in, work boots quiet on the carpet, and nodded politely at Linda. She was already opening the box, revealing a cake loaded with enough frosting to give an entire church social committee diabetes. The smell of artificial vanilla filled the room like perfume that's trying too hard. "Isn't it beautiful?" Linda's voice had that performing edge to it, like she was auditioning for something. "Tom, don't you think it's just perfect for Dad?" Tom cleared his throat. "Sure is elaborate. Nice piping work on those borders." Something in my gut clenched up, not from the sight of all that sugar, but from the way Linda's eyes kept darting between me and Tom, like she was waiting for specific reactions. Without really planning to, I found myself reaching for the box. "Tom," I said, forcing a cheerful tone, "why don't you take this home with you? Doctor's got me watching my sugar, and it seems a shame to let such fancy work go to waste." I practically pushed the box into his startled hands. The temperature in the room dropped faster than a winter sunset. Linda's eyes flashed at Tom, not hurt, mind you, but offended, like I'd just knocked over her chess pieces. Then her jaw locked into place, pushing out another smile that looked like it came from a magazine. "Oh, but Daddy," she said, voice sticky sweet, "I picked it out special for you." "And I appreciate the thought," I answered, patting the box, now firmly in Tom's grip. "But Tom here's got grandkids visiting tomorrow. They'll love it, won't they, Tom?" Tom, bless him, just nodded. "Sure will." "Thanks, Harold." "Linda." He made his exit with the careful steps of a man crossing thin ice. Linda's goodbye hug came with fingers that dug into my shoulders just a bit too hard. "Well, if you're sure that's what you want," she said, each word precise as a pinprick. "I'll call you tomorrow, Daddy." After she left, I stood there looking at my father's watch on the mantel, my shoulders feeling scolded where she'd squeezed them. Something about the whole scene nagged at me like a splinter, not just the fact that she'd brought a cake she knew I wouldn't eat, but the way she'd wanted Tom to see it all. I picked up the watch, its familiar weight solid in my palm. "What was that all about, Dad?" I murmured to the ticking face. "What exactly did I just turn down?" The next afternoon hit me like a gut punch. I was heading out to the shed to work on my old radio. Tinkering always cleared my head, when I noticed the padlock hanging open. Inside, my socket set was gone, the outline still visible in the dust where it had sat for 30 years. Not misplaced, not borrowed. Gone. A chill ran through me as I hurried back inside. My eyes went straight to the mantel, and sure enough, Dad's pocket watch had vanished too. The polished spot where it had rested looked like an accusation. I hadn't even settled into processing this when my front door crashed open. Linda stormed in like she owned the place, her designer purse swinging wild as her words. "How dare you?" The walls seemed to flinch at her volume. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? You humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood." I stayed quiet, letting her fury wash over me while I counted breaths like Louise taught me during rough patches. 10 slow counts then. "Good afternoon to you too, Linda. Don't you take that tone with me." She paced the living room, high heels clicking like angry punctuation. "I try to do something nice for your birthday, and you turn it into a spectacle, giving away my gift like it was nothing, and to Tom Reynolds of all people." My hand drifted to where Dad's watch should have been. "Speaking of things going missing, oh, here we go." She spun to face me, arms crossed. "Can't keep track of your things anymore, can you? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're getting confused, Daddy. Forgetful. It's why we need to talk about finding you somewhere and safer." The threat hung there wrapped in concern like poison in candy coating. A home, she meant. A place where I'd fade away while she handled my affairs. You ever notice how some moments split your world into before and after? This was one of those. My own daughter using my birthday as a setup for taking control of my life. "I'm not confused, Linda." I kept my voice steady, the way I used to when explaining complex machinery to apprentices. "I know exactly where that watch was last night, and my socket set too." Her laugh could have chipped paint. "See? This is what I mean. Paranoid accusations. Now, this is exactly why you need proper care. I think it's time for you to leave." I held out my hand. "And I'll take your spare key, please." For a split second, her mask slipped. I caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating before she covered it with concern again. "Daddy, be reasonable. The key, Linda." She slapped it onto the counter hard enough to make the sugar bowl rattle. "Fine, but this isn't over. I'm going to fix this, for your own good." The door slammed behind her with enough force to knock Louise's favorite wall clock crooked. I straightened it with shaking fingers, then sank into a kitchen chair. The walls seemed to lean inward as sunset painted long shadows across the linoleum. Louise had picked that pattern, said it reminded her of autumn leaves. Now it just looked like pieces of something broken. A gentle knock startled me from my thoughts. Tom stood in the doorway, holding up his phone like evidence at a trial. "Thought you might want to see this," he said quietly. "Took it last night, wasn't sure why at the time. Just felt off somehow." The photo showed Linda presenting that cake, but it wasn't a daughter's loving gesture captured in pixels. Her smile tilted wrong like a salesman closing in on a mark. Her eyes were focused past me, watching for reactions, measuring responses. Ice ran behind my ribs as pieces clicked together. The staged gift, the missing items, the confusion accusations. The setup had started long before that cake ever arrived. "Tom," I heard myself ask, "why would someone document giving a birthday gift?" He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Same reason a snake shows its belly before it strikes, I expect." I stared at that photo, at my daughter's performance smile, and felt sick to my stomach. What exactly is she setting up here? Sunday mornings used to be my anchor point, the steady rhythm of hymns, friendly nods in the vestibule, maybe coffee and donuts after service. Amazing how fast usual can crumble, isn't it? I noticed something was off the moment I stepped through those familiar double doors. Pastor Green was greeting folks ahead of me, all warm handshakes and easy smiles. But when I got close, he suddenly found the bulletin board fascinating. "Morning, Pastor," I said anyway, because my mama raised me right. He gave a tight nod without meeting my eyes. Harold. Then he was gone, moving away like I had something catching. The sanctuary felt colder than usual, even with the spring sun streaming through those tall windows. Two ushers I'd known for years, Bill and Marcus, turned their heads when I caught their eye. They'd helped me set up the Christmas pageant just last December, for heaven's sake. Now they couldn't spare a glance. You know that feeling when you're the only one not in on the joke. Multiply that by about 100, add a dash of dread, and you'll get close to what was churning in my gut. The sermon washed over me like white noise while I pieced it together. Linda had been busy, real busy. The sideways looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when I got close. She'd been painting quite a picture of her poor old confused daddy. I walked home slow, trying to settle my thoughts. Louise used to say a good walk could untangle any problem. Right then, I would have given anything to hear her calm voice cutting through the chaos. The mail was waiting in my box when I got there. Bills, junk, and one cream-colored envelope that made my hands go cold. Hanson and Lane, attorneys at law. Sometimes you know a letter's going to change your life before you even open it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Louise and I had shared 30 years of morning coffee, and slit the envelope with trembling fingers. Legal language has a way of making even simple things sound complicated, but the message came through clear enough. Linda was petitioning for financial conservatorship due to my diminishing capacity. She wanted control of everything I'd spent a lifetime building. 30 days until the hearing, circled in blue ink like a countdown to doomsday. I grabbed a yellow legal pad and started listing what I'd need. Bank statements, medical records, tax returns. The numbers in my checkbook swam before my eyes. After Linda's concerns reached the bank, they'd frozen most of my accounts. I had maybe $200 to my name until this got sorted. The kitchen went quiet, except for my pencil, scratching against paper. Then I heard it, clear as day, Louise's voice in my head. Fair play needs a strong backbone, Harold James Whittaker. Always has. She was right, of course. Louise had this way of cutting straight through to the heart of things. Even now, 7 years gone, she was still steering me straight. A knock at the back door made me jump. Tom stood there with an old metal thermos and 2 cups. Thought you might need this, he said, pouring rich dark coffee that smelled better than anything I'd managed lately. Saw you coming back from church. Looked like a man who'd just been kicked by his own horse. I pushed the legal letter across the table. Tom read it, his face getting darker with each line. 30 days, I said, tapping the blue circle. The sound seemed to echo like a clock ticking down. Tom set down his cup with the careful precision of a man containing anger. I know someone you need to meet. She used to be a judge before she retired. Sharp as they come, and she's got no patience for this kind of play acting. Can you be ready tomorrow morning? I looked at that blue circle again, feeling its weight. Who'd believe me over my own daughter, Tom? She's got half the town convinced I'm losing my marbles already. He leaned forward, eyes steady. People who know truth when they see it, Harold. People who remember what integrity looks like. We just need to find them. Monday morning came with that peculiar clarity you get after a night of hardly sleeping. I'd been up since 4, organizing my records on the kitchen table. You ever notice how papers seem to multiply when you're worried? Every receipt, every statement, looked both crucial and completely inadequate in the grey dawn light. Tom arrived at 8 sharp, with a woman I'd have picked as a judge even if he hadn't told me. Martha Ellison had this way of carrying herself that made my kitchen feel like a courtroom. But her smile was genuine when she shook my hand, and those clear eyes behind her glasses held more curiosity than judgment. Mr. Whittaker, she said, settling at the table. Tom tells me you keep detailed records. I nodded, pushing forward my ledger books. Started the habit when I was apprenticing. My old foreman used to say a man's only as good as his documentation. The smell of Tom's coffee filled the kitchen, while Martha studied my books. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone used to handling important documents. Every now and then, she'd make a small sound that reminded me of Louise checking our tax returns. These carbons, Martha said, holding up one of my duplicate checkbook pages. You've kept them all? Yes, ma'am. And the bank, statements to match. I pulled out another folder. Been doing it that way since '82. She picked up my most recent statement, comparing it to my ledger. These withdrawals here, $500 on the 12th, another $750 on the 15th. Your handwriting? No, ma'am, never wrote those. My stomach knotted just looking at them. That's when things started going missing too. My father's watch, Louise's jewelry. Martha's eyes narrowed slightly. And the signatures on these checks? Haven't seen them. Bank wouldn't give me copies after Linda raised her concerns. Tom, who'd been quietly leaning against the counter, straightened up. That's not right, is it, Martha? No, she said, closing my ledger. It's not. Mr. Whitaker, I'll help you prepare for this hearing. Can you come to my office Wednesday morning? Bring everything you have, receipts, mail, photos, anything that shows your regular habits and decision-making. The relief nearly knocked me sideways. Thank you, ma'am. What time? My phone buzzed. A bank notification. I opened the app and felt my throat close up. Account restricted. Excuse me, I managed, grabbing my jacket. Need to check something. The walk to the bank took exactly 12 minutes. I'd done it hundreds of times, usually to deposit my pension check or chat with Sarah, who'd been a teller there since Louise was alive. But today I got Marcus, the new branch manager, all press suit and practice sympathy. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitaker, he said, folding his hands on the desk. Given the pending guardianship petition, we have to restrict access to protect all parties involved. Protect? My voice came out rougher than intended. From what? My own money? Sir, it's temporary until the court makes its determination. I'm sure you understand. I understood, all right. I understood that I had exactly $23.45 in my pocket, and not a dime more I could reach. The grocery store felt different when you're counting pennies. I put back the coffee I usually bought, grabbed the generic soup instead. Counted out coins at the register while people waited behind me. Felt their stares burning holes in my back. Back home, I pulled out my yellow legal pad. Written, across the top, affidavits, timeline, character letters. Below that, I underlined Louise's watch missing for the third time. The words blurred as the kitchen grew darker with evening shadows. Martha's help this morning had felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. But now, watching the soup can sit lonely on my counter, that window seemed to slam shut. My chest felt tight, like it was working too hard for too little air. You want to know the worst part about being cornered? It's not the fear, though there's plenty of that. It's not even the anger, justified as it might be. It's the grinding question that keeps you up at 3 in the morning. How do you fight back when they've taken away all your weapons? Wednesday morning came with a chill that had me pulling my old cardigan closer. Martha arrived precisely at 9, her silver hair neat as a pin, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen its share of courtrooms. Tom showed up minutes later, thermos in one hand, phone in the other. Let's get organized, Martha said, clearing my kitchen table with efficient movements. Documents by month, going back 2 years. Mr. Whitaker, we'll start with your most recent transactions first. I spread out my records while Tom settled in a chair, scrolling through his phone. Got some pictures here from block parties, neighborhood meetings, he said. All dated, might help show Harold's, what did you call it, Martha? Pattern of engagement, she replied, not looking up from my checkbook. Social proof that Mr. Whitaker regularly participates in community activities, makes sound decisions, maintains relationships. The morning light stretched across my papers as Martha built what she called our timeline of competence. Every receipt, every carbon copy, every carefully noted expense, they all found their place in her system. Now, she said, uncapping a pen, let's draft your sworn statement. Start with the property tax payment in March. Paid it early, I said, the numbers coming easy. $2,247.82. Then the furnace repair in April, $680 for parts and labor. Church tithe every month, 120 files like clockwork. She nodded, writing in precise strokes. Good. Details matter, Mr. Whitaker. Exact amounts, specific dates. They show a mind that tracks and manages. Tom looked up from his phone. Got that photo from the church picnic last month. Harold's running the grill, talking with the mayor. Perfect, Martha said. Evidence of social judgment and responsibility. The afternoon wore on. Martha shifted to role-playing, taking on the voice I imagined Linda's lawyer would use. Mr. Whitaker, isn't it true you sometimes forget important dates? No, ma'am, I practiced, keeping my voice steady. I maintain a calendar and set reminders for all appointments and obligations. And these missing items from your home, perhaps you simply misplaced them. I've documented every missing item, including my father's watch and my late wife's jewelry. I can describe each piece and when I last saw it. Around 4, I called Pastor Green. The conversation sat heavy in my chest. "Harold," he said, his voice careful, "I'll read your letter to the court, but testifying, well, Linda's raised some concerning points about your behavior at services." My fingers tightened on the phone. "What behavior, Pastor?" "Just observations. I'm sure it will all get sorted out." He paused. "I should go." "God bless, Harold." The kitchen clock ticked louder after I hung up. My stomach growled. I'd forgotten lunch again, and the generic soup cans were running low. I pulled out the hearing notice, the date circled in blue. Under it I wrote 27 days in thick strokes. Martha gathered her papers, outlining next steps with military precision. Friday, we file the initial response and character statements. Monday morning we appeal the bank freeze. They've overstepped their authority. Tom, you'll drive Mr. Whitaker to both appointments? Tom nodded. "Count on it." I smiled and thanked them both, stood at the door waving as they left. The moment it clicked shut, my legs went weak. I dropped into Louise's old chair, the one that still held the impression of her favorite spot by the window. The kitchen had grown dim. Outside, porch lights were clicking on up and down the street. Somewhere, Linda was probably talking to someone else about her poor, confused father. My neighbors were listening, maybe nodding, probably whispering. You know, what eats at you in moments like this? Not just the betrayal, though that burns hot enough. It's the whispers you can't hear, the stories you can't correct, the quiet poison of doubt spreading through conversations you'll never know about. I switched on the lamp Louise had picked out 30 years ago, its familiar glow pushing back the shadows. The clock kept marking time, each tick another moment closer to the hearing that would decide if I could keep living the life I'd built. 27 days. The numbers stared back at me from the paper, bold and demanding. 27 days to prove I was still myself. Friday morning brought a chill that made my joints complain, but I straightened my tie and grabbed the folder Martha had prepared. The courthouse steps felt steeper than I remembered from jury duty years back. Maybe it was the weight of what we were carrying, not just papers, but proof I wasn't who Linda claimed. Martha met me at the top, precise as always in her grey suit. "Good morning, Mr. Whitaker. Ready?" I nodded, following her through security. The metal detector beeped at my belt buckle, and I had to step through twice. Used to be I'd have made a joke about it, but today wasn't for laughing. "Third floor," Martha said, leading us to the elevator. "Family court filing office." The halls smelled of floor wax and worry. You ever notice how government buildings all have that same antiseptic smell, like they're trying to clean away the human stories that walk through their doors? Tom was already waiting by the clerk's window, holding his phone and a manila envelope. He gave me a quick nod that steadied my nerves some. Martha laid out our documents with the precision of a surgeon. My sworn statement, bank records, proof of bill payments, even photos of my organized workshop. "Everything in order," she told the clerk. "Notice of opposition to the guardianship petition, with supporting exhibits A through G." The clerk's stamp came down with a thunk that echoed in my chest. Official now. No turning back. Tom stepped up next, sliding forward his envelope. "Additional exhibits," he said. "Time-stamped photos and my sworn statement regarding Linda Parker's behavior at her father's birthday." I watched the cake photo disappear into the court file. Strange how one casual snapshot could carry so much weight. By the time we finished, rain was drumming against the courthouse windows. Tom offered me a ride, but I needed the quiet of my own house to make some calls. The first was to Mike Davidson, my old shift supervisor. "Harold," he said warmly, "been meaning to check on you since I heard, well, you know." My stomach tightened. "What exactly did you hear, Mike?" He coughed. "Look, I'll write that letter for you. Known you 30 years, never met a more methodical man with a lathe or a ledger." The second call went to Bill Thompson from the machine shop. "Count on me, Harold. Still remember how you caught that decimal error that would have ruined that whole aerospace order? Sharp as they come. But Carl Reeves, my former union rep, hit me where it hurt. Sorry, Harold. Been hearing things. Don't want to get involved in family matters." "What things, Carl?" My voice came out harder than I meant it to. "Just things. Take care of yourself, okay?" The line went dead. The rain kept falling as afternoon slid into evening. My phone chirped. Voicemail from the bank. I already knew what it would say, but I played it anyway. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Sandra from First State Bank. We've reviewed your situation, but account restrictions must remain in place pending the hearing outcome. If you need emergency funds, please have your daughter contact us directly. Have my daughter contact them. The same daughter who'd created this mess. I hung up and walked to the pantry, counting cans like I used to count machine parts. 4 soup, 3 beans, 2 peaches. Enough for a week if I stretched things. The rumble of a familiar engine made me freeze. Linda's BMW idling out front. Her headlights swept across my curtains, catching dust motes in their beam. I stood perfectly still, watching her shadow in the driver's seat. What was she thinking, sitting there in the rain? Was she checking to see if I'd broken down yet? Waiting for a light to go out, a sign of surrender? After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, she pulled away. The taillights disappeared into the wet dark, but something inside me had crystallized. Standing there in my dimming kitchen, I felt a vow harden between my ribs. She could freeze my account, spread her poison stories, try to lock me away in some facility, but my dignity wasn't something she could repossess. The rain eased up around midnight. I sat at the kitchen table, Louise's favorite teacup in front of me, empty but comforting. Money might be Linda's weapon of choice, but something told me she had other tactics ready. Saturday morning came with a knock that wasn't selling anything or seeking signatures. Tom stood on my porch, holding a paper bag that smelled like heaven after a week of generic soup. "Neighborly carbs," he said, pulling out a fresh loaf and a carton of eggs. "Can't let your cholesterol get too healthy." My throat tightened a bit. "Tom, I can't—" "Already done," he cut in, moving to the counter. "Besides, my sister went overboard at the bakery again. You're doing me a favor taking some off my hands." That was pure fiction. Tom's sister was as careful with portions as Louise had been, but I let him have his pride. Sometimes kindness needs its little lies. I was cracking the second egg into a pan when Martha's silver Volvo pulled up. She carried a thick folder, and that focused look I remembered from our first meeting. "Harold," she said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "Something's not adding up in these bank records." Tom poured coffee while I settled into my chair. Martha laid out 3 months of statements, each page dotted with yellow sticky notes. "See these transfers?" She pointed to a series of withdrawals. "They start small, 2 months before Linda filed her petition. Then they get bolder." I leaned in, squinting at dates and amounts. "I didn't authorize those." "No," Martha said quietly. "I don't believe you did." She pulled out a magnifying glass, actual glass, not one of those plastic things, and held it over several signature lines. "Look at these loops, the way the H connects. Compare them to your known signatures." My hand shook slightly as I studied them side by side. The fake ones were close, but like a photo slightly out of focus. All the parts were there, but something was wrong in the details. "Someone did their homework," Tom muttered, looking over my shoulder. "Practiced your signature." Martha's lips tightened. "We can subpoena the original documents, request a forensic review. Banking records leave trails, Harold. If someone's been forging your signature—" She let that hang there while I tried to steady my breathing. The eggs Tom made sat cooling on the counter, forgotten. I spent the afternoon practicing what I'd say at the hearing, making sure anger didn't crack through my voice. Martha had been clear: stick to facts, stay calm, let the evidence speak. "Your Honor, I've managed my own affairs for 57 years, I rehearsed to my empty living room. "I balance my checkbook monthly. I pay my bills on time. The text alert cut through my practice like a knife through butter. Unknown number, but my gut knew who it was before I opened it. "Stop fighting, Dad. You'll only embarrass yourself." I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands felt cold. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a window into Linda's mind. She really believed I was the one who should be ashamed, that I was wrong to defend myself. The forged signatures kept flashing in my mind. How long had this been happening? How much had already disappeared while I trusted my own daughter? Each transfer I saw was like a small betrayal, adding up to something I couldn't quite face. Yet, Tom must have seen something in my expression when he checked in that evening. He picked up the phone I'd left on the table, read the text, and set it down without a word. Just pulled out a chair and sat with me while the kitchen got darker. "You ever notice," he said finally, "how the hardest hits always come from family?" I nodded, thinking of Louise's watch, now probably sold or hidden away somewhere. They know where we keep our hearts. The room felt heavy with questions I wasn't ready to ask. How many signatures had been forged? How much money had vanished? And underneath it all, the question that hurt most: When had my daughter started seeing me as a resource instead of a father? We sat there while evening shadows stretched across my kitchen floor, two widowers sharing the kind of silence that says more than words. I couldn't sleep that Sunday night. The kitchen clock's tick-tock felt like it was counting down something bigger than hours. You know that feeling when your mind won't shut off, just keeps spinning like an unbalanced wheel. Every 15 minutes, I'd check the time. 10 past midnight, 25 past, 1:45. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts echo. I kept seeing those forged signatures dancing behind my closed eyes. Louise would have made me chamomile tea, said something practical about how problems look different in daylight. The memory of her voice, calm and sure, made my chest ache. Back then, even our worst days had felt manageable because we faced them together. When my alarm finally buzzed at 6, I was already dressed and on my second cup of coffee. Martha's Volvo pulled up right at 7, precise as a surgeon. She carried her usual leather briefcase, but there was something extra determined in her stride. The morning air had that early fall bite as we walked to the bank. Martha didn't do small talk, just reviewed our strategy in that measured voice of hers. "Let me handle the initial request," she said, as we approached the glass doors. "They might try to stonewall, but I know exactly which regulations apply." The same clerk who'd frozen my accounts was working the counter. Her smile wobbled when she saw us. "We need complete archives of Mr. Whitaker's accounts," Martha stated, "including original signature cards and transfer authorizations." The clerk's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. "I'm not sure I can—" "Section 438.2 of the Banking Code," Martha cut in smoothly. "Account holders' right to documentation. Would you like the full citation?" I watched the clerk's face shift from reluctance to resignation. Sometimes authority isn't about volume, it's about knowing exactly which quiet words carry weight. It took them 40 minutes to produce everything. Martha insisted on original documents, not copies. Every time the clerk tried to substitute something less, Martha would quote another regulation, calm as could be. By early afternoon, we were back at my kitchen table. Martha had arranged the papers in neat chronological piles, like dealing out a deck of cards that told my financial story. "Look, here," she said, pointing to a transfer from March. "Notice how the memo line reads Furnace Repair, with an A. You've never spelled it that way in your ledgers." I felt my face heat up as the pattern emerged. Little transfers at first, testing the waters. Then bigger ones, bolder ones. Each signature a near-perfect copy of mine, but with tiny tells. A loop too wide, a cross too high. The shame hit me first. Shame that I hadn't noticed sooner, that I'd been so easily fooled. Then anger burned through, hot and clean, making my hands shake. But right behind it came something worse. Pure exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers that maybe giving up isn't so bad. "Martha," I said, my voice rough, maybe supervised access wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm tired of fighting my own daughter." Martha's eyebrows shot up, like I'd suggested burning down the courthouse. She set down her pen and looked at me hard over those clear-rimmed glasses. "Harold Whitaker," she said, "the truth doesn't get tired. It doesn't need rest or breaks or compromises. It just needs people willing to stand by it." I nodded, but I could feel tears pressing behind my eyes. "Funny how you can agree with something in your head while your heart's still dragging its feet." "I know," I whispered, "but I'm 75 years old, Martha. Some days I barely have energy to make breakfast, let alone wage war." She was quiet for a moment, just long enough for me to hear that damn kitchen clock marking time. "My father," she said finally, "used to say that standing up straight takes more energy than slouching, but only one of them keeps your dignity intact." I stared at the scattered papers, each one a small piece of betrayal laid bare in black and white. The weight of it, all pressed down on my shoulders like wet cement starting to set. Tomorrow was another day of fighting. Tomorrow I'd need to find strength somewhere in these old bones. But right now, watching the afternoon sun fade on my kitchen wall, I honestly didn't know where that strength would come from. The courthouse steps were slick with morning drizzle as Tom, Martha and I made our way up. My good suit felt stiff, hadn't worn it since Louise's funeral 3 years back. Still fit, though. I'd been too anxious to eat much lately. You ever notice how some buildings seem to grow taller the closer you get? That's how that courthouse felt, looming over us like a steel and concrete judge before we even got inside. "Remember," Martha said as we passed through security. Let them present first. Don't react. Don't interrupt. We want the judge focused on evidence, not emotion. Tom gave my shoulder a quick squeeze. Just like working a precision part, he said. Patience before pressure. The courtroom wood gleamed dark and serious, with rows of empty benches stretching back like church pews. A few early bird lawyers shuffled papers near the front. The air felt thick with furniture polish and tension. Linda was already there with her attorney, some sharp-suited fellow who looked like he charged by the breath. She'd done her hair, the way she did for real estate showings, not a strand out of place. When she saw me, she gave this little headshake like I was a child who still didn't understand what was good for him. Martha guided me to our table, setting out her materials with the precision of someone laying out surgical tools. Our folder looked mighty thin compared to their stack of documents, but Martha had told me that truth doesn't need padding. All rise, came the call, and up we went. The judge, a steady-looking woman about my age, took her seat and started reviewing the basics of the case. Linda's lawyer stood first, all polished and practiced. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of protecting a vulnerable senior citizen from his own declining judgment. He went on, painting a picture of me that I barely recognized, some angry old man who couldn't handle his checkbook and lashed out at his poor concerned daughter. He had affidavits from people I thought were friends, all carefully worded to make normal senior moments sound like warning signs. Mr. Whitaker has become increasingly erratic, he continued, refusing family gatherings, making accusations, and most recently causing a scene at his own birthday celebration. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my face neutral, just like Martha had coached me. Tom shifted in his seat behind me. I could practically feel him wanting to object. Furthermore, the lawyer added, we have documented instances of concerning financial decisions that put Mr. Whitaker's security at risk. Martha sat calmly beside me, making occasional notes. I noticed she'd positioned our folder right where the judge could see it, like a chess piece waiting to be played. When Linda's lawyer finally wound down, Martha rose slowly. She wasn't tall, but something in her posture commanded attention. Your Honor, before we proceed with our response, I'd like to enter several exhibits into evidence. She lifted our thin folder. First, we have complete bank archives for Mr. Whitaker's accounts, including original signature cards. The clerk marked them and passed them up. The judge adjusted her glasses. Second, Martha continued, we have a forensic overlay of signatures from various transactions, particularly focusing on transfers from the past 8 months. I watched Linda's face carefully. Something flickered there, quick, like a shadow passing over water. And third, Martha said, we have a photograph from Mr. Whitaker's birthday, taken by his neighbor, Mr. Reynolds. The photo made its way to the judge's bench. I remembered that moment clearly now, Linda's camera-ready smile, the calculated way she'd presented that cake. The gallery behind us started whispering as copies were passed around. The judge studied the signature comparisons, her eyes narrowing at certain points. She held up 2 documents side by side. These loops on the name Harold, she began. My hands were clasped so tight my knuckles had gone white. I could feel the question coming, the one that would crack this whole thing open. Linda's lawyer was shuffling through his papers now, looking less certain. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the judge to continue. I glanced at Martha, who gave me the slightest of nods. We'd laid our cards on the table. Now we just had to wait for someone to call the hand. Martha stood with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you're holding 4 aces. Your Honor, I'd like to call Ms. Rebecca Torres from First National Bank. A trim woman in a navy suit made her way to the witness stand. She carried a leather portfolio that I recognized from my own banking days, the kind they use for official records. Ms. Torres, could you explain your role at First National? Martha asked. I'm the records supervision manager. I oversee all document authentication and archive access. Martha nodded. And these check images we've submitted, can you verify their authenticity? Yes, these are certified copies from our secure archives. Ms. Torres adjusted her glasses. Each one has intact tracking metadata. Linda shifted in her chair. I kept my eyes forward, remembering Martha's advice about staying focused. Could you walk us through the signature patterns you've observed? Martha handed her the overlay sheets. Ms. Torres held them up to the light. The signatures from January through March match Mr. Whitaker's signature card perfectly, but starting in April, there are notable inconsistencies. She traced the air with her finger. The H shows different pressure points, and the old in Harold has a completely different loop structure. The judge leaned forward. And these questionable signatures, what types of transactions are we discussing? Multiple transfers, Ms. Torres replied, ranging from $2,000 to $5,000 each. They moved from Mr. Whitaker's primary account to a savings account, then to an external account at Metro Credit Union. Martha produced another document. Your Honor, this Metro Credit Union statement confirms the receiving account belongs to Linda Parker. A murmur ran through the gallery. Tom's hand touched my shoulder briefly. Linda's attorney jumped up. Objection. This is beyond the scope of a guardianship hearing. The judge's expression hardened. Overruled. Evidence of financial exploitation is directly relevant to this petition. She turned to me. Mr. Whitaker, did you authorize these transfers? No, Your Honor. My voice came out steady. I keep careful records of every transaction. I'd be happy to show you my ledger entries for those months. Martha handed me the bank statements. Could you identify any legitimate transfers you did make during this period? I nodded, pointing to specific lines. This one for $742.18 was my property tax. This $156 was the furnace repair. I have the receipt right here. And these monthly transfers of $200 are my regular church tithe. And the larger transfers to Metro Credit Union? Never saw them before today. Never signed for them either. The judge studied the documents again, her face darkening. Miss Parker, she said, looking directly at Linda, these discrepancies suggest forgery and conversion of funds. This court will be making a criminal referral to the district attorney's office. Linda's perfect hair couldn't hide how pale she'd gone. Her lawyer was scribbling frantically. Furthermore, the judge continued, I find the timing of this guardianship petition highly suspect, coming as it did after months of unauthorized transfers. I kept breathing slow and steady, just like Martha had practiced with me. The courtroom felt both huge and tiny at once, like standing in the eye of a storm. Ms. Torres, the judge asked, what's the approximate total of these questionable transfers? Just over $47,000, Your Honor. More whispers rippled through the gallery. I thought of all those nights counting change for soup, while my own daughter. The judge set down her papers with a sharp tap. Before we proceed with the ruling, I want to be very clear about the gravity of what's been presented here. We have compelling evidence of systematic financial exploitation through forged instruments. She paused, removing her glasses. The question now becomes what this court must do to protect Mr. Whitaker's interests, not from his own decisions, but from something far more troubling. The judge cleared her throat and the room stilled. In light of the evidence presented, this court finds no basis for a guardianship order. In fact, Mr. Whitaker has demonstrated exemplary financial management and documentation practices. She fixed Linda with a stern look. The petition is denied with prejudice. My shoulders loosened for the first time in weeks. Furthermore, she continued, I'm ordering immediate restoration of Mr. Whitaker's full banking access. Ms. Torres, please ensure First National processes this by close of business today. The clerk brought over papers, and the sharp sound of stamping echoed through the courtroom. Linda's lawyer was already packing his briefcase, not meeting anyone's eyes. I watched my daughter's perfect posture crack just a little as she stood. You know what burns worse than losing money? Seeing your child choose greed over grace. The ache went deeper than any empty account. Martha squeezed my arm as we walked into the corridor. Well done, Harold. You stayed calm and clear. Exactly what was needed. I was about to respond when Pastor Green appeared, wringing his hands. His collar looked a bit tight. Harold, I owe you an apology. I should have asked you directly instead of... He trailed off, color rising in his cheeks. Instead of believing rumors, I kept my tone gentle. No point in grinding salt now. He nodded, eyes downcast. The church council will want to make this right. We should never have distanced ourselves. Tom's steady presence at my shoulder made it easier to answer. Sunday service as usual, Pastor. That's all I need. Near the building's front doors, I glimpsed Linda hurrying toward her car. Mrs. Johnson and Betty Miller, who'd been my neighbors for 20 years, turned their backs as she passed. The whispers were already starting, not loud enough to hear, but clear enough to feel. "Harold," Martha said, guiding me toward the courthouse steps. "We should discuss next steps. There's a clear path for restitution of the transferred funds, plus interest," Tom added with a grunt. We paused on the steps while Martha outlined the process. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket, probably more neighbors hearing the news. Linda's car pulled away from the curb and I noticed how alone she looked through the windshield. The spring air felt different somehow, cleaner maybe, or just lighter on my skin. But something still sat heavy in my chest, like smoke that needs clearing. Winning back my accounts was one thing. Winning back my peace of mind, that would take a different kind of work. Tom must have read something in my expression. "You're thinking too hard again," he said. "Just wondering how to reset things," I admitted. "Can't keep letting that birthday hang over everything." Martha tucked her papers into her briefcase. Sometimes the best response to a false narrative is to write a true one. She had a point. Linda had tried to turn my birthday into proof of my decline. Maybe what I needed wasn't to forget it, but to reclaim it. Make it mean something else entirely. But how do you rewrite a memory that's been poisoned? What gesture could be strong enough to clear away the taste of that staged cake, those fake smiles, that whole performance of false concern? I thought about Louise, how she'd always said birthdays weren't about the cake, they were about choosing who to share it with. The answer started taking shape in my mind, but I wasn't quite ready to grab hold of it yet. "First things first," Martha said, checking her watch. "Let's get you to the bank while they're still open. Make sure they process that order promptly." Tom nodded. "Then maybe some real groceries? Enough soup to last a lifetime, I bet." I managed a small smile, but my thoughts were already turning towards something bigger. Something that could transform this whole mess into a beginning instead of an ending. I just needed to figure out exactly what that something was. The courthouse steps were starting to empty now. A few people nodded to me as they passed, their expressions warmer than they'd been in weeks. The tide was turning, all right. But I knew from my machinist days that when you're resetting a system, you need more than just repairs. You need a new calibration point, a fresh start that makes sense of everything that came before. I just had to find mine. The evening light slanted golden through my kitchen window, catching dust motes that danced like memories. I'd just finished putting away a proper grocery run, real coffee, fresh bread, eggs that hadn't come from Tom's kindness. My accounts were mine again. The bank manager had practically tripped over himself to process the court order. "Special delivery," a cheerful voice called from my front porch. Tom's sister Annie stood there holding a bakery box, her smile genuine and warm. Behind her, Tom and Martha were climbing my steps, Martha with her briefcase tucked under one arm. Come in," I said, and for the first time in weeks, the invitation felt completely mine to give. Annie set the box on my counter and lifted the lid with a flourish. "Blue's still your favorite, right?" The cake was a thing of beauty. 2 layers of vanilla crowned with frosting the exact shade of summer sky. No agenda hiding in those swirls, no performance waiting to be staged. Just butter, sugar, and honest affection. "It's perfect," I said, my voice a bit rough. "Thank you, Annie." Tom was already moving to the cupboard where I kept my coffee cups. "Martha, you still take yours black?" "Always," Martha replied, settling at my kitchen table. She'd loosened her collar since court, but her spine was still judge straight. Though I wouldn't say no to a slice of that cake. I lifted Louise's cake stand from its shelf. Crystal and silver, simple and elegant, just like her. The familiar weight in my hands brought back Sunday afternoons, grandkids' birthdays, quiet celebrations that needed no audience. The phone rang twice while we were setting up, but I let it go to voicemail. Word was spreading fast. Mrs. Johnson from next door had already texted that Linda's supervisor at the bank was very interested in the court's findings about forged signatures. The Millers reported that Linda had been uninvited from the neighborhood council. Small consequences maybe, but they'd add up like grains of sand until she'd need to relocate to escape her own reflection. I centered the cake on Louise's stand, making sure it sat just right. The chrome trim on my counters caught the evening light, and my freshly wiped porcelain gleamed. Everything in its place, everything earned. Martha set out plates while Tom poured coffee. The familiar scent filled my kitchen. Real coffee, not the bargain brand I'd been rationing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's watch. recovered from Linda's house along with my socket set. The gold case caught the light as I placed it beside the cake stand, its face turned outward like a sentinel. "To Harold," Martha said, raising her coffee cup, "who reminded us all that patience and truth make excellent partners." "To Harold," Tom and Annie echoed. I looked at these people gathered in my kitchen, a retired judge who'd believed in evidence over emotion, a neighbor who'd documented truth when it mattered, his sister, who understood the power of an honest gesture. They'd stood with me not because we shared blood, but because we shared something rarer, respect. The cake waited uncut on its crystal throne, blue frosting catching the last sunlight. I thought about Linda's cake, how it had been meant to paint me as addled and ungrateful. This one told a different story, about choice, about worth, about who deserves a place at your table. I squared my shoulders and picked up the cake knife. The weight felt right in my hand like my old machinist tools, balanced, purposeful, precise. I looked at my friends, these people who'd earned their slices not through demands or manipulation, but through simple decency. "Respect," I said, making the first clean cut, "is the only inheritance that matters." Tom nodded slowly. Martha's eyes crinkled at the corners. Annie touched Louise's cake stand with gentle fingers. We all understood. Some lessons cost more than money, and some victories taste sweeter than sugar. I served each slice with steady hands, my father's watch keeping quiet time beside us. Through my window, I could see my garden taking on evening shadows, my tools back in their shed, my world right side up again. Everything that mattered was right here in this kitchen, measured in coffee steam and trust, and the simple power of choosing who gets a slice in your own home.